So let's dive into a really interesting and maybe a little counterintuitive question. To save something, do you first have to own it? Could the idea of private ownership actually be one of our best tools for protecting the environment?
Okay, so here's how we're going to break this down. We'll start with the basic problem of scarcity, then look at how markets and property rights try to solve it. From there, we'll see if that solution holds up when we're talking about natural resources. And finally, we'll get real about the limits of this whole idea.
First things first, we've got to get our heads around the one single problem that is the foundation of all of economics. It's a challenge that you, me, everyone deals with every single day.
And that problem, in a word, is scarcity. To put it simply, we all want a lot of stuff, but there's just not enough to go around. We can't have it all. And that basic fact, that tension, forces us to make choices. That's really what economics is all about.
So given that we can't have everything, how do we decide who gets what? Well, let's take a look at how a market economy tries to manage scarcity, and it does it by tapping into two really powerful human instincts.
You've probably heard of the economist Adam Smith, right? He had this famous idea he called the invisible hand. His whole point was that when people are out there just trying to do what's best for themselves, they can kind of by accident end up doing what's best for everyone else too. But how on earth does that actually work?
Well, Smith saw it as this incredible balancing act. On one side, you have self-interest. That's the engine, right? It's what gets a baker out of bed in the morning to bake bread. But what stops that baker from selling you a tiny burnt loaf for $100? That's the other side, competition. Competition is the regulator that keeps pure self-interest from running wild.
And this leads us to the absolute key ingredient that makes the whole system work. For that invisible hand to do its thing, individuals have to be able to own and control things, resources. That, right there, is the whole idea behind private property rights.
Okay, so this gets us right to the core of it all. What is it about owning something that makes it so powerful? Why does it completely change the game?
Really think about it for a second. Why do you treat something you own so differently from something you're just borrowing or renting? It all comes down to one word: incentives.
Think about a rental car versus your own car. With the rental, you just need it to work for a few days, right? Get from point A to point B. But with your own car, you're thinking long-term. You get the oil changed, you fix the little dings, you take care of it because you have a stake in its future value. Ownership completely shifts your mindset from just using something to taking care of it.
And this isn't just about cars, This idea scales up across the entire economy. When people feel secure in their ownership, they have a real reason to use their property wisely, to invest in making it better, and even to come up with new ways to increase its value. It's a massive engine for progress.
All right, so that's the theory. Sounds pretty good on paper, but does it actually hold up in the real world? Especially when we're talking about something as complicated and important as our planet's natural resources. Let's put it to the test.
First up, let's talk about the stuff we can replenish. Renewable resources, like forests.
So check this out. Let's say people start wanting more lumber for houses and furniture. Well, that means the price of lumber goes up. And for the people who own the forests, that's a huge signal. It gives them a direct financial incentive to plant more trees to meet that future demand. The market is actually telling them to grow the forest, not just to chop it down.
Okay, that makes sense for things you can grow more of. But what about the stuff that's finite? Resources like oil or coal or natural gas that we can't just make more of.
Well, here's where things get really interesting. The incentive completely flips. Instead of producing more, the incentive is now to conserve. As a non-renewable resource gets more scarce, its price goes through the roof. And that sends a powerful message to the market: get efficient or get left behind. Waste becomes incredibly expensive, and suddenly, conservation is the smart business move.
Now, it would be really easy to just stop right here and say, see, private property is the answer. But, well, it's not the whole story. The market system has some serious blind spots, and it's so important that we understand where it can go wrong.
Economists have a name for these situations. They're called market failures. It's basically when everyone pursuing their own self-interest doesn't lead to a good outcome for the group. It's when that invisible hand kind of drops the ball.
The classic example of this is something called an externality. Think about a factory polluting a river. The factory owner gets the benefit of making stuff, but they don't pay the cost of the dirty water. Nope, the community downstream does. Because nobody owns the clean river, that cost is external to the deal, and the market just ignores it.
This quote really nails it. It gets at this famous idea called the tragedy of the commons. When a resource belongs to everybody, it kind of ends up belonging to nobody. Without that direct, personal stake in it, the incentive for anyone to take care of it for the long run just vanishes.
All right, so where does all this leave us? We've seen that ownership can be this super powerful motivator, but it clearly has some major limitations. Let's try to bring it all together.
As you can see, private property is really a double-edged sword. On one hand, it's this amazing engine for efficiency and new ideas, but on the other, it can totally fail to deal with big problems like pollution and inequality. And we can't forget, property rights don't just exist in a vacuum. They only work if you have a stable government there to define and protect them.
So what's the bottom line here? The big takeaway is that private ownership can be a fantastic tool for conservation. It can line up our own self-interest with taking care of things. But it's not a magic bullet. It's not a complete solution on its own. It often needs to work hand in hand with smart government policies to really get the job done right. And that leaves us with the final and pretty challenging question to chew on. If ownership is so important for protecting things, what do we do about the crucial resources that are almost impossible for anyone to own? Things like our atmosphere or the deep oceans. How do we manage those for the future of our planet?